Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I caught her lie over dinner. Not from her words. Those had always been polished. But from the half-second pause before she answered. We were sitting at Olive Garden, her parents across the table, our two daughters next to me. The same spot we'd celebrated anniversaries, birthdays, even her promotion last year. I lifted my glass and said lightly, "Darling, how about some wine?" She smiled, practiced and distant. "No, dear, I'm trying to lose a few pounds." Everyone laughed politely, except me. I set the glass down. "Or is it because you're taking antibiotics after catching an STD on that last cruise with your cousin?" The silence that followed was total. Even the waitress froze mid-step, holding a tray of breadsticks like a shield. My wife, Allison, went pale, then red. Her mother's fork clinked against the plate. My eldest daughter, Emily, 16, whispered, "Daddy," and then louder, "There's something else I need to tell you." That sentence broke me more than the affair. Because her tone wasn't shocked, it was guilty. I stared at her across the table, and for a second, everything slowed. The restaurant noise faded. I could hear my own pulse. "My name's Mark Hansen, 41 years old, paramedic with the county EMS. I've pulled people out of wrecked cars at 3 a.m., done chest compressions in driveways, held dying strangers' hands. But nothing prepared me for that sentence from my own child." Allison tried to speak, voice trembling, saying we should go home, talk privately. Her father muttered something about public humiliation. I didn't move. I just watched her. The woman I'd trusted since college, the mother of my girls, the one who'd told me that cruise was for work. That cousin she mentioned was Ryan Blake, a travel agent we'd known for over a decade. Family friend. Cookouts, Christmas gifts, even helped plan our honeymoon. Turns out he'd been planning a different kind of trip lately, one my wife didn't need a suitcase for. I took a slow breath, stood up, and dropped enough cash on the table to cover the meal. "We'll talk at home," I said quietly. On the drive back, she tried to explain, to twist it into some misunderstanding. I said nothing. Silence is louder than shouting when you've seen the worst parts of humanity. I just gripped the wheel of my Honda Pilot and kept driving, wondering how long she'd been rehearsing her lies, and what exactly my daughter was about to confess. Emily's voice still echoed in my head as we pulled into the driveway. The porch light flickered, the same one I'd been meaning to fix for weeks. Allison got out first, walking fast, like distance might undo what I'd said at dinner. I stayed in the car for a moment, watching the reflection of our house in the windshield. It looked normal, almost peaceful. But peace was a trick of lighting. I'd seen that before. Blood on white tiles looks clean under fluorescent light until you wipe it. I stepped out, grabbed my jacket from the back seat, and followed her inside. The girls went straight to their rooms. Emily hesitated at the stairs, eyes red. I told her quietly that we'd talk in the morning. She nodded, biting her lip. Allison stood in the kitchen, hands shaking, saying it wasn't what I thought. She said Ryan was just a friend, that the cruise was business, that she loved me. The usual script. I didn't answer. I just opened the fridge, poured water into a Dunkin' cup I'd brought home earlier, and watched her reflection in the window. People talk too much when they're lying. I'd learned that in the field. Shock makes some silent, guilt makes others loud. When she realized I wasn't responding, her tone changed. Anger. She said I'd humiliated her, that bringing it up in front of her parents was cruel. I finally turned and said one thing. "You humiliated yourself." Then I went upstairs, changed out of my uniform, and sat on the edge of the bed. My phone buzzed, message from an unknown number. It was Ryan. "We need to talk. Don't do anything stupid." I stared at it for a long time, then blocked the number. That was my first quiet move. At 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of the front door. Allison was leaving, suitcase in hand. She didn't notice me at the top of the stairs. I didn't stop her. The house went still again. For the first time in years, I felt calm. Not angry, not broken. Just empty space where chaos used to be. And in that silence, one thought repeated. I'd spent my life saving other people. Maybe it was time to save myself. The next morning felt unreal. The house smelled like coffee and panic. Emily sat at the table, her phone untouched beside a half-eaten waffle. Her little sister, Megan, was still asleep upstairs, unaware that our world had just cracked open. Allison's car was gone. her closet half empty. But her perfume still lingered in the hallway, a ghost of a life that used to feel solid. I poured myself a cup, sat across from Emily, and waited. Paramedics learn silence. You let the patient talk until they tell you the truth. She finally whispered that she'd known about the affair for weeks. She'd seen messages pop up on her mother's phone, photos, plans, jokes about the cousin story. She hadn't said anything because she didn't want to break our family. My chest tightened, not from anger, but because she'd been carrying that weight alone. She said Ryan had been around the house while I was on night shifts, fixing the patio lights, helping with the car, staying for dinner. A family friend. The betrayal didn't surprise me anymore. The choreography did. I'd been written out of my own home in real time. After she left for school, I called in sick for the first time in 8 years. I spent the day cleaning, not because the house was dirty, but because I needed order. I scrubbed the counters, washed every glass, took out the trash. Routine is therapy when you've seen trauma. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Ryan again, this time from a different number. I ignored it. Then another. Then a voicemail. She's confused. Don't make this ugly. His voice was calm, practiced, like he'd handled this before. Maybe he had. I deleted it, no response. That night, I opened our shared T-Mobile account and checked the call logs. Over 200 calls in the past 3 months. Mostly at night, while I was on shift. Some lasting over an hour. There it was, proof measured in minutes, not emotion. I didn't rage, didn't confront. I saved screenshots, backed up everything, and poured another coffee. The worst part wasn't that she'd cheated. It was realizing how quietly it had all happened right under my roof. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying every moment I'd ignored. The way she smiled at her phone, the sudden weekend retreats, the new dresses that didn't match her usual style. All the evidence was there, but I'd been too focused on saving other people to notice my own life was bleeding out. At sunrise, I drove to the station, parked behind the ambulances, and sat there watching the lights flicker against the building. Being a paramedic teaches you to function under collapse. Heart stops, you keep working. Marriage stops, you keep breathing. That morning, I decided something. I wasn't going to break down. I was going to rebuild, quietly, methodically. At work, I requested a transfer. Temporary, I said. Night shifts only, fewer interruptions. My captain looked at me for a long second and just nodded. He'd seen that look before in other men. The kind that meant something was ending at home. During the next few weeks, I stayed busy. Double shifts, gym, even weekend classes for certification renewal. Anything that kept my hands occupied and my head quiet. The nights were long, filled with sirens, cracked windshields, and the smell of antiseptic. But there was peace in the chaos. The kind I hadn't felt in months. Allison tried calling once, then again a week later. I didn't pick up. Her voicemails sounded rehearsed, shifting from apology to anger to silence. I never responded. One afternoon, I found a note slipped under the door. She wanted to talk about us, said Ryan was out of the picture, said she missed the girls. The handwriting was familiar, but it felt foreign now, like reading a language I used to speak. I folded it and placed it in a drawer. No response. One Friday night, Emily texted me from her friend's house, saying her mother had stopped by unexpectedly. I told her to stay there. I didn't ask questions. People like Allison thrive on reaction. Silence, though, that unnerves them. And mine had just begun to speak louder than anything she could ever say. 2 weeks later, I came home from a 14-hour shift to find her car in the driveway. The porch light was fixed. For a moment, I almost smiled at the irony. She was sitting at the kitchen table, calm, composed, a coffee cup in her hands. The kind of stillness that comes before a storm. She said she just wanted to talk, that the girls needed stability, that she'd made a mistake. Her voice was smooth, trained. I'd seen addicts bargain this way before. Calm, logical, promising change. I didn't interrupt. She asked if I'd been seeing anyone. I said no. Truth was, I barely had time to sleep, let alone feel anything new. She started crying then, saying Ryan had used her, that she'd been lost, that she wanted to come home. I watched her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Home isn't here anymore." That hit her harder than shouting ever could. She said we could go to therapy, rebuild. I said nothing. I took my jacket off, hung it on the chair, and went upstairs. The conversation was over before it began. The next day, I packed a small bag, called a buddy from work who rented out an apartment above his garage. I signed the lease that evening. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, simple. The kind of place where silence doesn't echo, it breathes. I left a note for the girls explaining everything, clear and steady. No anger, no accusations. Just facts. Emily texted later, said she understood. Megan didn't, but she would one day. I took the Honda Pilot, filled it with what mattered, uniforms, photos of the kids, a box of keepsakes, and drove away. I stopped at Dunkin' for coffee, sat in the parking lot, and realized I felt lighter than I had in years. The next morning, Allison sent a long message about forgiveness, about second chances. I didn't reply. I forwarded her the contact for my lawyer instead. That was the moment I knew the old version of me was gone. I wasn't running. I was upgrading the system. Quietly. Permanently. The apartment was small but perfect. Quiet neighborhood, a short drive to the station, nothing fancy. The kind of place where no one asked questions. I bought a few essentials from Kohl's, new sheets, towels, a cheap coffee maker. Starting from zero wasn't new to me. Every emergency call begins that way. You arrive, assess the damage, and start building life back from chaos. That's what this felt like, triage for the soul. The first week was brutal. No laughter from upstairs, no sounds of the girls arguing over TV shows. Just the hum of the fridge and the faint smell of disinfectant from my gear bag. I'd wake up before dawn, make coffee, and sit in silence. People think silence hurts after betrayal. It doesn't. It heals, 1 inch at a time. Allison kept reaching out, emails mostly. She wrote that she was seeing a counselor, that Ryan had left town after losing his job at the cruise agency. The words were meant to draw sympathy, but all I saw was noise. When she asked to meet, I agreed, but only in public, where emotion couldn't infect logic. We met at Cracker Barrel, a place neutral enough to make the conversation tolerable. She started talking about redemption, about rebuilding trust for the girl's sake. I listened quietly. When she finished, I told her she'd confused forgiveness with access. She could have the first one someday, but never the second. I left her sitting there, stunned, while I paid for my coffee and walked out. No shouting, no drama, just a clean exit. That night, Emily called to say her mom was struggling, crying all the time. I told her people heal at their own pace and that she didn't need to carry anyone's guilt but her own. She thanked me, her voice steady for the first time in weeks. When I hung up, I realized something. This wasn't loss anymore. It was transformation. My old life had burned down quietly, and what was left wasn't ruins. It was foundation. Months passed, and I started to enjoy the quiet. The job kept me grounded. Emergency calls, long drives through empty highways, the steady rhythm of saving strangers. Every life I helped felt like reclaiming a piece of my own. I saw Allison only at custody exchanges, brief and formal. She tried small talk at first, asked if I was eating right, sleeping enough, seeing anyone. I gave her the same answer every time. I'm fine. Nothing more, nothing less. My voice was calm, detached. That calm made her nervous. It was power without noise, and she could feel it. One evening, after a double shift, I stopped by a small diner for dinner. A family at the next booth reminded me of how we used to look. Fake smiles hiding fractures. I finished my meal, tipped the waitress, and left before nostalgia could poison the progress I'd made. On the drive home, I thought about how strange it felt to finally be free from the emotional noise that used to fill my days. The quiet wasn't loneliness anymore. It was clarity. Emily started visiting my new place more often. She said she liked the peace, that it felt lighter there. She'd make jokes about decorating or bringing her sister for a sleepover. I could tell she felt safer here, away from her mother's emotional storms. That meant more to me than any apology ever could. I bought an extra blanket, stocked her favorite snacks, and let her choose a small plant from Kohl's to keep on the windowsill. Little rituals. Small anchors in a new life. One night, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, stronger, sharper, calmer. The same man who'd once begged for connection was gone. In his place stood someone different. Someone immune to chaos. Allison had wanted to shatter me. Instead, she'd reforged me. And somewhere deep down, I think she knew it. It was a Sunday morning when Allison showed up at my apartment unannounced. She looked smaller somehow, her confidence drained. She said she'd been thinking that maybe we could start over, take a trip somewhere quiet. I didn't invite her in. I stood in the doorway, hands in my pockets, calm. She said she'd changed, that she missed who we used to be. I told her that version of us didn't exist anymore. The words came out soft, but they hit hard. She started to cry, saying she couldn't sleep, that Ryan had been messaging her again. She wanted me to help her deal with it. That was when I realized she wasn't looking for love. She was looking for an anchor. And I wasn't it anymore. I told her she needed to contact the police if she felt unsafe, not me. Her face twisted, like she couldn't understand the distance. She said I'd become cold. I told her she mistook peace for coldness. There's a difference. She left in silence, walking back to her car without looking back. Watching her drive away felt like closing a book I'd already memorized. That night, I drove to the old neighborhood to pick up the girls. The house looked different, paint peeling, yard overgrown, the kind of decay that starts inside before it shows outside. Emily ran out to greet me, smiling, while Megan waved from the porch. Allison stood behind them, watching through the screen door. For a moment, I saw pity in her eyes, not for herself, but for what she'd lost. The version of me that would have forgiven her, fixed her, stayed. That man was gone. On the way back, we stopped at Dunkin' for hot chocolate. Emily teased me about my black coffee, said I was predictable. Maybe I was. Predictable, steady, alive. That night, after the girls fell asleep on the couch, I looked around my small apartment, the folded blankets, the quiet hum of the heater, and realized this wasn't just survival anymore. It was rebirth. By spring, I had stopped checking her messages altogether. The silence between us had become permanent, like a line carved into stone. My days fell into rhythm again. Work, gym, quiet dinners at the apartment. I'd started volunteering at a local training center, teaching CPR to high schoolers. It felt good to use what I knew without sirens blaring in the background. Some of the instructors invited me out for drinks after class, and for the first time in a long while, I said yes. It wasn't about escaping anything. It was about returning to life. Allison, though, didn't fade away as easily. She sent emails, sometimes just one sentence long. Things like, "I saw you at the grocery store today," or "Do you ever think about us?" I didn't answer. The old me would have felt guilt. The new me just felt distance. She'd been the one who taught me silence could be a weapon. I'd simply mastered it. One evening, after class, I came home to find a note slipped under my door again. Same handwriting, same perfume. I almost threw it away, but something made me read it. She wrote that she'd been diagnosed with anxiety, that therapy was helping, that she wanted to apologize face to face. There was sincerity in the words, maybe even pain. But I didn't feel anything. Empathy without attachment. That's what healing looks like. I drove to the coast the next weekend, no plans, just me and the open road. The Honda Pilot hummed steadily as the miles blurred by. I stopped at a small cafe near the water, the kind of place where nobody knows your name, ordered coffee, and sat watching the horizon. It wasn't running away. It was arriving somewhere new. When I got back that night, Emily had texted me a photo, her and Megan laughing in the park, sunlight catching their faces. No captions, no explanations. Just proof that life was still moving forward. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I'd lost a family. I felt like I'd built a new one, starting from the silence up. It's been a year now. The divorce papers were signed quietly, without ceremony, without war. We met once more in the lawyer's office, just to finalize everything. She looked tired, older, like time had finally caught up. When it was over, she asked if I hated her. I told her no. Hate requires energy, and I'd stopped wasting mine a long time ago. She nodded, like she expected that answer. Then she asked if I'd ever loved her. I said I had. Deeply. But love, like oxygen, only works when both people breathe. Then I shook her hand, stood up, and left. No bitterness, no backward glance. Life after that became simple in the best way. I still worked the same job, still drove the same car, still drank coffee from Dunkin' before every shift. But I wasn't the same man. I'd become deliberate, controlled. My world had shrunk to what mattered, my daughters, my work, my peace. Emily started her first job that summer. Megan joined a soccer team. We met for dinner at Olive Garden on Sundays, just the three of us. They'd talk about school, friends, plans. I mostly listened. They didn't know it, but they were teaching me how to live again. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I'd think about how everything had begun, with a single question over dinner and the silence that followed. That silence had once felt like destruction. Now it felt like strength. I didn't raise my voice, didn't chase revenge, didn't play her game. I simply stepped out of it. And in doing so, I'd built something unbreakable. The last message Allison ever sent me said, "You've changed." She was right. I'd learned that peace isn't given. It's built, piece by piece, like a steady heartbeat after chaos. Some men fight fire with fire. I chose silence. And in the end, that silence rebuilt my life louder than any storm she ever brought. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.